Good morning. Welcome home. Who feels like they're at home? Home is a place where you're comfortable, where you're most comfortable. So my hope for you is that coming to church is like coming home. And if you don't feel like that, some people hate going to parties, hate going to crowds, those introverted sort of people, and they don't know what to do. Like you get to a party and you feel uncomfortable. I heard a bit of advice that if you want to be comfortable at a party, find them the least comfortable person in the room and make them comfortable. There's someone in the room who's going to be either more uncomfortable than you or at least on an even par. Go and make them comfortable. Go and make someone else comfortable. Go and make people comfortable, and all of a sudden you begin to feel like, I've got a purpose. And once you've got a purpose, you feel comfortable. Once you feel comfortable, I'm hoping church will become like coming home. Now that we're comfortable, let's go on to a really uncomfortable subject, adultery. But let's pray. Father, it's awesome to meet together. It's like a breath of fresh air in a week that can be quite stressful, sometimes quite dark and ugly. Sometimes we come to church, we just drag ourselves in because we don't really appreciate what the goodness of being here is all about. Father, we're here with fellow believers, brothers and sisters, co-heirs with Christ, sons and daughters of the living God. With you as our Father, our brothers and sisters around us, may this be a time where we can open up. May this be a time where we can lay our stresses down. We can share them with each other, not to burden one another, but to encourage each other. Father, that we might leave here feeling uplifted because of the time we've spent with people made in your creation, people made in your likeness, people who are family. Father, thank you for choosing me to be a part of your family. Thank you for choosing these brothers and sisters as a part of your family. And if there's anyone here that doesn't feel like they're a part of the family, I pray that at the end of today, you might speak to them. And they may want to become a part of the greatest family they could ever be a part of. Father, thank you. And all this being made possible through your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Exodus chapter 20 verse 14 says, "You shall not commit adultery." In Jesus proclaiming the good life which he's been doing through Matthew chapter 5, and then in the last few verses he's talked about the fact that not one iota of the law is going to be cast away because the law is good. He goes back to the initial laws that were given to the Israelites, to the Old Testament, to Exodus chapter 20, the 10 Commandments. We all know those 10 Commandments, don't we? Probably don't know them all off by heart, but we know they exist. They're there in Exodus chapter 20. And last week we discussed, do not murder. And we all went, woohoo, I can do that one. But then as Jesus starts to expound what it means to do not murder, we all start to realize that really there is murder in each one of our hearts. Our hearts are distracted, our hearts are deceitful. Our hearts are all about ourselves. And murder is a lot more than just not going out and killing a person. It's degrading a person. And so then when we get onto this next commandment, you shall not commit adultery, we should not just stop and think, oh, well, I never committed adultery, woohoo! There's always going to be more. But wait, there's more. Adultery. What does it mean to commit adultery? I mean, is it just something that married people can do? Or is it something that non-married people can do? Well, what is this? And adultery is all about that thing of stepping outside of a marriage boundary, and usually is to do with sex, but doesn't always have to be. In taking something which doesn't belong to me in order to make it my own. Whether it be a married spouse, whether I be married and I'm breaking the relationship with my wife and my husband, not ruling the women out, even though here it specifically talks about men and the problems they have. Or whether it be as an unmarried person stepping outside of the boundaries of marriage and having relationships with people that we shouldn't be having, shouldn't be involved in. That's adultery. And so when it talks about, we read it here and it says, you have heard that it was said, do not commit adultery, but I tell you, anyone that looks at a woman lustfully, it's not just about women. I mean, this is a problem that men suffer from. More so than women. Men have testosterone, they have greater sex drive, so it seems, and therefore it is a problem that men struggle with. But the problem goes far beyond that of sexual desire. If you want to go back to Exodus chapter 20, the 7th commandment is do not commit adultery, but the 10th commandment says, you shall not covet your neighbour's house, you shall not covet your neighbour's wife, or his manservant, or maidservant, his ox, or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbour. And I appeal to you that this is what Jesus is talking about. Not just sexual relationships with an unmarried partner, but about the fact that we desire to get for ourselves that which doesn't belong to us. In the fact of adultery, it's about taking on or seeing somebody else, someone of the opposite sex, and in these days you might even say someone of the same sex, to be something that adds value to my life. It's a problem that hasn't just existed in the last 20 years. It's something that's been around forever. Job in chapter 31 actually says, I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a young woman. If my heart has been enticed by a woman, or if I have lurked at my neighbour's door, and I'm going to skip down to verse 11, for that would have been wicked and a sin to be judged. It is a fire that burns to destruction. And I want you to hang on to that verse there, verse 12. It is a fire that burns to destruction. In the beginning, God created mankind in his image. Mankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Now, in a macho world, men seem to think that we're created in the image of God and woman was just created as the helper. But Genesis 1 clearly says that man and woman were made to be the image of God together. You cannot be the image of God one without the other. It's like they complement each other. Mankind was made in God's image, but then he makes man and woman in the image of God. One is not one more important than the other. One does not hold jurisdiction over the other. But it seems, and it's part of the curse of Genesis chapter 3, when Adam and Eve sin against God, that it says that man will rule over woman and woman will subdue to the man. It's actually part of the curse. It's part of the curse, and I've heard it said that it's one of the saddest verses in the Bible, because it's the consequence of mankind's sin against God. That man would actually subdue woman, and they do so. We live in a world where men are paid more than women for doing exactly the same job. And I mean, there's a lot of arguments both sides to that, and I'm not going to go into that. But there is an unbalance. But now there's also almost the opposite. With the women's movement, the women want the upper hand. And now there's an unbalance the other way. But can you see the problem is not that women are better than men or men are better than women. It's the fact that we think ourselves better than we are. It all comes back to my picture of who I am. I have a picture of myself that I am worth so much more that anything I desire that I see with my eyes, I should take for myself. For men, it is a problem with women. It's a problem with pornography. It's a problem with what you see on the TV. It's a problem with what you read. It's a problem with the conversations you have with guys at the pub. It's a problem that is in the media. It's in the newspapers. It's in the magazines. It's on your computer. Ads pop up all the time. And it's pushing a drive for men because they know the weakness of men. But it is also a problem for women. And it may not be the whole sexual drive. It may be what it is that I need out of other people to make me feel important. What I need from such and such. I walk into someone's house and they have this awesome kitchen. I don't know, women, do you look at people's kitchens? I want that kitchen in my place. And therefore I covet that kitchen, and I feel like that is the thing that is going to make me feel whole. And Jesus says there's a problem with that. And it's not just the problem that I look and I desire and I take. He says the problem comes far before you taking, before you committing the act of adultery, before you commit the act of stealing, before you commit the act of going out and spending too much money on something that you shouldn't spend money on. Is there's a problem with your eye. Because the eye is connected to the heart, and the eye is what feeds the heart. What you see through your eye, it is like a passageway to your heart. And what you see, you can't help what you see. I walk and I see everything in this room right now. Oh, maybe not so well, my eyes are a bit blurry, but yeah. I can't help what I see, but it's what I focus on. It's what I focus on that is the problem. In fact, the words here, but I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully in his heart, the word lustfully or the word look is actually one that means to keep looking. Not to just pass over, you can see a pretty girl down the street and know that she is pretty, but to focus on with a desire to stir up feelings within your heart that I want what I see. You can go, ladies, to the kitchen or to the dress shop and see a nice dress, or you can see someone who's wearing nice jewelry or whatever it is and say that is lovely jewelry, but to focus on whatever that is and then desire that for yourself is the problem. It is what you do with your eye that is the problem. The eye is a good thing. You don't want to live without it. For some people, they do. And I think that would be very hard because I use my eyes all the time in everything I do pretty well. The eye is a good thing given to you by God to allow you to see His beauty, to see the things around you. But when you use the eye for your own self-importance, when you use the eye for your own ego, when you use the eye for your own advantage, there becomes the problem. So when Jesus says, if your eye causes you to sin, gouge it out, that's a pretty gruesome picture, isn't it? It's a pretty gruesome picture that if your eye is going to cause you to sin, to gouge it out. But if the option is to continue sinning, which is the better option? And it's no mistake that the next thing he says it is, if your hand causes you to sin, what are you going to do with it? Cut it off. Because you're better to go through life with your hand cut off than to keep on sinning. Why the hand? Because once you see with the eye, the very first thing you're going to do is to take. Genesis chapter 3 in the Garden of Eden. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree, after the snake brings it to attention, when the woman saw the fruit of the tree, saw that it was good and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she did what? She reached out with her hand and she took and gave some to her husband who was with her and ate it. And what happens next? The eyes of both of them are open and they realize they are naked. So again, they see more than they were expected to see, more than they were supposed to see. And what do they have to do next? They have to take sewed fig leaves and sew them together to make coverings for themselves. But then God actually gives them the coverings of animals. There's this problem, this connection with the eye and the hand that affects the heart. And Jesus is saying, you need to get this under control. It is of dire circumstance that you get this under control. Because the sin is not actually what the eye sees. And the sin isn't actually what the hand does. The sin is the decision you made in here before you did it. We point to the heart. I don't know why we point to the heart. The heart pumps blood. In the Old Testament, the heart is actually yourself, your being, your mind, who you are. And so it's more about the mind. That the eye feeds the mind. And then the mind decides to make a decision on that and do something about it. And so once you get to the hand, then you've acted on it. And as we said last week about anger, is that anger will happen within you. Anger is that response to the fact that someone is doing something which affects me and I don't like it. And we are humans, and so we'll all experience anger. He's not saying the anger is good. But once you experience anger, deal with it. Don't allow it to take control. Deal with it. And if you're battling with anger, great. Great. Because the other option is that you allow anger just to take over and do its thing. So if you're battling with your eyes and with seeing things that you really want for yourself, if you are battling with that, if you are struggling with lust, if you're struggling with the fact of adultery, if you're struggling with the fact of wanting what other people have, great. You are human. And you're full of desires. If you are not struggling with these things, there's two things going on. You're either superhuman and can control yourself way better than anyone I've ever known, or you're allowing those ideas to take a hold of you. So what will it be? Will you struggle with lust? Will you struggle with your eyes? Will you then deal with the eyes? Or will you deal with the hands that are then doing the actions? Or will you go to the next consequence? And what does Jesus say? It says it's better for you to pull your eye out and get rid of it if it's causing you to sin, than for your whole body, and my version says, to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. For it's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. Now, I've got a bit of a problem here, is that the Bible, the Greek version, doesn't actually say hell. The Greek actually says Gehenna. And it's translated in most versions as hell. But Gehenna is actually a valley. It's a physical valley in Jerusalem. A physical gap between two hills. And it has a history. And I've actually preached on this before, that the history of that is that it's a rubbish dump. Well, you know what? Archaeologists can't prove that. Archaeologists are saying it only became a rubbish dump in about 1200 AD. That's as far back as the rubbish in that valley, as far back as the history goes. And so therefore the whole idea that the rubbish dump burns and therefore you've got the eternal fire that goes on and the maggots and all the rest, is a bit of a stretch. In fact, the history of Gehenna goes right back. And if you get a chance to read at any stage, go back to Chronicles. And there's a story there about the king Ahaz. And you know, they're going through the different kings that ruled Judah. And they're saying this king did this and he was good in the eyes of God. And this king did this and he was bad in the eyes of God. King Ahaz, actually followed by the rules of the Canaanites who owned the land beforehand, and involved himself in child sacrifices, in the burning of his sons and daughters, which took place in the valley of Gehenna. That is the history of Gehenna. It was a place where child sacrifices, where innocent children were burnt alive for the sake of the god of Moab and for the sake of the god of Moloch. They took on the practices of the Canaanites in those lands and decided that, yes, we're going to follow God, but at the same time, we're going to follow all these other gods. And it wasn't just Ahaz. It's Manasseh. In 2 Chronicles 33 verse 6, we hear that he involved himself in the same practices. And it is abhorrent in the eyes of God. When you go to Isaiah 66, I think it is. Well, I haven't got that written down. But if you go to Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 30 to 34, Jeremiah chapter 7, 30 to 34, it says, "The people of Judah have done evil in my eyes, declares the Lord. They have set up detestable idols in the house that bears my name and have defiled it. They have built the high places of Topheth in the valley of Ben Hinnom," which is Gehenna, the valley of Gehenna, "to burn their sons and daughters in the fire, something I did not command, nor did it ever enter my mind. So beware, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when people will no longer call it Topheth or the valley of Ben Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. For they will bury the dead in Topheth until there is no more room. When the carcasses of these people will become food for the birds in the air and the beasts of the earth, and there will be no one to frighten them away. I will bring an end to the sounds of joy and gladness, to the voices of bride and bridegroom in the towns of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem, for the land will become desolate." So in the days of Jesus, when he is giving the Sermon on the Mount, when he talks about Gehenna, they're not picturing a dump. They're not picturing the rubbish dump where animals and rubbish and bodies were thrown. They would be picturing this, the place where child sacrifices occurred by the kings of Judah, and the retribution that is to come because of the sins of the Israelites. Because God is a just God. Do you truly believe that God is a just God and he will find justice? And he says that I will meet justice in that valley. For the sins of these people, I will find justice and it will be dealt out in that valley. And yet he's bringing this up when he's talking about adultery. Interesting, isn't it? What does adultery have to do with child sacrifices? It's the sin of the people that is detestable in the eyes of God. Not because God is a God who just likes to put rules on us to show his dominance, but because he is a loving Father who wants what is very best for you. Starting to go through that stage where we have teenagers in the house. And I'm not saying my teenagers are bad teenagers. I'm not talking about you, Gwendolyn. It's all right. Yeah. But teenagers always have a reputation, don't they? They go through this trying period where they become, we're rebellious. That's probably the word, isn't it? They start to get minds of their own and thoughts of their own, and they want to push the boundaries and test things out. And parents, you love your kids, do you not? You love your kids and you want what is very best for them. And little do they know that you were once teenagers too. Kids, did you know that? Your parents were once teenagers too. They once went going through the same hormonal changes that are going in your life. They once went to school and had to deal with kids their own age. They once had to get lost and decide what they're going to do for the future and all the rest of it. But parents want what is best for their kids. And so they put laws in place. Not laws, but rules or guidelines or whatever it might be. And sometimes as kids, you will get in trouble. I remember getting in trouble a lot from my mum. I remember my mum breaking quite a lot of rulers on my backside. Wooden spoons. Thanks, Mum. It was worth it. Because she'd set down rules in my life that I really didn't want to adhere to, because I'm a 12-year-old kid who knows everything. I know more about myself than anybody else knows about me. I know what I want to do and what I'm going to go and do, and don't you tell me you're going to stop me. They do try, and it does hurt. But you can also be defiant about that too as kids. Isn't it frustrating as a parent when kids won't listen to what you say? When you have what's best in mind for them, but they won't listen to what you say. Am I the only one who feels frustrated or has felt frustrated? Why won't they listen? Could it be because we don't listen? See, you're setting those rules down in your house to protect your children. You want them to avoid things that I've been through in my life. I want my kids to avoid that because I can now see the errors in my ways and I can see the consequences of my actions. And if I could just get it through my kids' brains that that's a bad way to go, then maybe they can avoid that. Do you know that's why God's laws exist? It's not like kids, I tell my kids there's no screen time because screens, I don't need a reason, I'm dad. There are no screens. And my kids would ask, hopefully, why? It's all right to ask why. But there's a reason behind everything I ask my kids to do, usually. But as I am trying to be a good father, I know God is a good father. And there is a reason behind every law he lays down. And when it talks about adultery, he knows exactly the hearts of men. He knows exactly the consequences that are going to come from you breaking this rule. He knows more, so it's not just about the act of adultery, it's about your eyes, that if you focus on the wrong thing with your eyes, it's going to get you into trouble. And he's not just saying that if you keep doing the wrong thing, that's it, you're going to hell. He's saying, no, you keep doing the wrong thing and hell's coming to you. As I said last week, you can experience hell here on earth. Gehenna was hell on earth. It was as far distant as you could get away from God's desires. What did he say in Jeremiah? That I did not ask you to do these things, and the thought has never crossed my mind. But you can bring hell to yourself by not listening to the rules of God, by not listening to his laws. And it's not wrong to ask why. It is not wrong to ask why. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it's by a Jewish guy, and he was saying that in the Jewish religion, they don't ask why. The rules are there, you obey the rule. You don't need to know why, you just obey the rule. And yes, as time passes, we need to adjust the rules to, don't drive your cart through Woolies or whatever it might be. That doesn't work in today's age because not everyone has a cart except for Ken. But they have to adapt the rules, but they still don't need to know why the rule is in place. Jesus is saying here in Matthew chapter 5, this is the rule, this is why it's in place. You commit murder, don't commit murder, you still can commit murder in your heart. Adultery, it's all about your eyes. It's about what you focus on. It's about what you do with the information you've got. But the consequence of that is like hellfire. It's like a guilt that will burn within you. It is a consequence that you will suffer in your own being. And so when I say, do you struggle with adultery? Do you struggle with wanting what is not yours? Great. Because when you struggle, you know there is something going on within you that is at odds to the world. Because the world will just say, just go for it. You're the most important person in the world. Your happiness is what is most important to you. Just go for it. And yet the world is not a happy place. As you desire happiness, what happens? I need something else to fill that hole. And that's why I have that. I need something else to fill that hole. And Jesus is saying, no. You want to experience joy in your life? Listen. Listen. It is hard to watch people grieve. It's hard to still, like when someone dies, it's a grieving time. But when someone goes through a hard time in their life where they realize that they are in the wrong and they've done something terribly wrong and it breaks them down, it's hard to watch. but it is beautiful to watch. It is beautiful to watch. Because in Matthew chapter 5, the first verse is the Beatitudes. Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." The good life belongs to those who realize that their actions are not great. Blessed are those who grieve. Blessed are those who see their actions as being bad and are broken by it. That is the good life. Blessed are those who then hunger and thirst for righteousness, for good relationships between people. Because what this is all talking about is terrible relationships between people, where I am up here and you are down there and I just take what I want. But blessed are you if you struggle with sin, in whatever form it is. And blessed are you if you weep over your sin, if you see what it can cause. For justice is coming. Our God is a just God. And if you're going to take advantage of the weak, if you're going to take advantage of the innocent, just as they did in the time of Ahaz, then he will bring justice. And if that is you, then he is coming for you. And he says, better off cutting that hand off or gouging that eye out than falling into the ravine of Gehenna and suffering the justice for what you have done wrong. So if you find yourself teetering on the edge, maybe you find yourself at the bottom of the ravine and you fear what is coming for you, I want to offer you hope. That my God is a God, not just of the mountain, but my God is the God of the valley. That if you find yourselves at the depths of despair because of your own wrongdoing, he is mighty and he is powerful enough to pick you up out of that valley. This is the good news of Jesus Christ. That you're not worthy of being pulled up out of that valley, but through Jesus Christ, who has died on your behalf, he's now paid the price in full. You accept him, he's thrown a rope to you. He's pulling you up. We're about to sing a song. And it says, for the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. And because I know you're a good God, I'm not afraid to show you my weaknesses. If this is home to you, if these people around you are brothers and sisters, please do not be afraid to show them your weakness. Because that's far better than gouging your eye out. And that's far better than cutting your hand off. Share your weaknesses with people. And in fact, metaphorically, it will do just that. It will help you to begin to adjust your eye and adjust your hand so that you won't find yourself in the valley of Gehenna where justice is coming for your actions. The valley of Gehenna, the valley of bones, the valley of suffering. Gary talked a few weeks about finding beauty from ashes, from the fire that burns. Remember that verse we read in Job chapter 31? If I find my notes here somewhere. Which says, I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a young woman. If my heart is enticed, that would have been wicked, a sin to be judged. It's a fire that burns to destruction. That is the fire that Jesus wants you to avoid. And no matter where you find yourself, he is big enough to bring you out of that. So let's stand and sing as our prayer for ending the service. This song, that God can take the worst of the worst of me and of you and make the best of the best for his glory.